With me is John Rees from the People's Assembly. Welcome to Going Underground, John. What is the People's Assembly? Do you think the public even knows what it is?
Yeah, I think they do, and I think it's an idea whose time has definitely come. In fact, I think there was pent-up demand for it, because all the way through the recession, there have been different groups of people, often very powerfully, revolting against government policy. The students did it in 2010. The unions did it the year afterwards. There have been campaigns against hospital closures and welfare cuts, but nobody had brought them all together under one roof. And when we founded the People's Assembly last June, that's exactly what we did in the biggest anti-austerity conference that has there ever been in this country, and we got the unions there. You know, often unions that
back Labour. The unions are back Labour.
Some back Labour, like Unite. 1.5 million members are supporting this campaign. Some, like the PCS, have never supported Labour.
So the People's Assembly are forwarding Labour policies. You're backed by the same people.
No, what we're saying is we don't care what government is in power. We're fed up with austerity. It's ruining the economy. It's ruining people's lives. And whether it's this government or a future Labour government, we don't want to know about it.
But how can trade unions that are supporting Ed Miliband be supporting you, and therefore the People's Assembly?
Because they'll say this. They'll say, look, we can tell the difference between the party which is the open representative of big business in this country and a party which is still, despite the fact that Ed Miliband doesn't like it, based on organised labour. We can tell the difference between these two things. But we don't want a party which is based on organised labour, which represents Tory policies. We want them to actually represent the people who sent them there in the first place, who created the Labour.
Decades.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm not sure if people do know what the People's Assembly is out there.
Well, we had a day of action this week, November the 5th, in which there was more direct action and civil disobedience around this country at any time since the height of the anti-war movement.
Unite is supporting you. Do you think Ed Miliband will soon have to disassociate himself from Unite and from you, or Unite will have to disassociate himself because you're for civil disobedience and anarchy?
That's a decision that he has to make, whether he wants to turn round to a movement which now represents the vast majority of unions in this country, the vast majority of anti-cuts campaigns, the vast majority of natural Labour supporters. If he wants to turn round and say, no, we agree more with the Tories than we agree with you, then that's his choice. But it isn't actually what he's done.
I don't think he's going to do that.
No, he isn't. And what's interesting,
but if there's rioting on the streets,
well, let's see.
Unite will disassociate.
Well, let's see what he does. But what he's actually done, as a matter of fact, is they made a little shuffle to the left. What he's actually said is, hey, I don't like what the energy giants are doing, and I'm going to freeze their prices. I don't like the bedroom tax, and I'm going to repeal it. I don't like what the private landlords are doing, and I'm going to do something about it.
If he thinks he's going to get leverage, or the People's Assembly is going to get leverage in a landslide Labour victory, which everyone's assuming is going to happen, we have history on this. We have previous. The unions never get what they want, do they, in a Labour government?
Well, it depends. It depends very much on the pressure that's brought to bear on them. I mean, who thought that it would be a Tory Prime Minister who found that he couldn't go to war in Syria? That was 10 years of campaigning and more.
Maybe that's because Tory backbenchers are more courageous than Labour ones.
No, I think it's because he looked at the opinion polls and he said, I know what happened to Tony Blair's Prime Ministership, and I don't want that happening to mine. And I think that was the effect, not totally the effect, but in part the effect of 10 years of campaigning. And I think that we...
By you and your... in the Stop the War coalition.
By the anti-war movement.
Okay. Are you competing, though? I mean, you've been a long time against austerity, different forms of austerity policies from Thatcher onwards. You know very well how those that are in power try and split those opposed to it. So we have Anonymous, we have Occupy. You're trying to bring these together, but aren't there fights now starting between them?
No, actually, Occupy have a representative on the sort of steering committee of the People's Assembly. It's actually a very important moment where a movement like that is now working with the organised trade union movement, is working with the anti-cuts campaigns, and that's precisely how we designed it, and it's working.
Are you ever going to... is there going to be a People's Assembly edict to your supporters, to the supporters of the Assembly, saying, hang on a minute, you have to be opposed to this cut or that cut or this privatisation or that privatisation?
Firstly, we don't issue edicts. Secondly, we don't have...
Democratically...
we don't have to issue an edict on that question.
Democratically voted on edicts, I meant, not papal.
No, there won't be anything like that, because what we're doing is coalescing a mood that already exists. Look at the opinion polls. 84% of people in this country oppose any further privatisation. A majority of people want to see the cuts stopped. So we don't have to create that. What we do have to do is organise it. See, working people have only ever got two strengths. They've got their numbers and their organisation. But the numbers aren't any good unless you have the organisation. That's what we're trying to bring.
Does the Labour Party support you at all?
Labour Party members do. The whole Labour Party, no. But very important figures in the Labour Party and very important Labour Party supporting trade union leaders do, because they want to see any government, whatever government, even a Labour government, as not having a no austerity programme.
But so Ed Miliband isn't going to invite people from the People's Assembly
I
committee
doubt that.
there.
I doubt that very much.
And the civil disobedience angle to the campaign. We know about the massive strike action, all the different unions now planning strikes in Britain. What happens when the media starts to turn on you and says that you are voices for anarchy and are trying to destroy the country?
Well, you have to reckon with that kind of media
Well,
coverage.
usually those organisations have failed in the past, militant or whatever.
Well, I don't know. Well, what happens? What's interesting about this is, of course, there's this enormous furore at the time. Let's remember the anti-poll tax riot. There was hysteria in the press that evening. You know, there were people's cars being burnt outside the Royal Opera. But what happened? It forced a crisis in the Tory party. It forced Margaret Thatcher's resignation, and we don't have a poll tax. And we didn't have a poll tax because of that movement. Look what happened with the students. When they had that huge demonstration, what was the effect of that? The following year, the trade unions decided that they had to move because it couldn't just be left to the students on their own. So, you know, the headlines on the day that this kicks off and the actual impact are two very different
This time around, there are ideological voices on the backbenches of the Labour and Tory parties saying we must privatise, that there is a philosophical reason that G4S, Serco, all these big multinational companies must take over British industry, the little of it that is in national public ownership.
And it's hated. Hated. You know, the response to the attack on the energy companies has been universally popular. In fact, it bumped Miliband's ratings in the opinion polls when he made that speech. People hate this stuff. I mean, they've had now over a generation of privatisation. They look at, you know, if you stand on a station long enough, waiting for a train that you're paying most of your disposable income for a week to travel on, you can't find a seat, it arrives late, if it arrives at all, people conclude that, hey, maybe nationalisation wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Okay, but then there's not a support for unions per se, and union membership is down as well as party membership.
Not in the last year. It's been in decline, but last year it rose again for the first time, and that's because the unions started doing something. All the opinion polls show that if the unions start fighting, people are attracted to them. The NUT has had a massive bump in its membership precisely because it's had some strikes and seemed to be standing up to the government.
John Rees, thank you for coming on Going Underground.
Thank you.